Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. As Marcus was explaining, I'm here to talk a little bit about Buddhism from the perspective of my practice, and I'm hoping to give you a little bit of content. You may know that the Buddhist teachings that we see, the various Buddhist sects, there's many of them, are all derived from the original Buddha that lived in India sometime before Common Era. And the practice that I follow is based on the teachings of Nichiren, who was a 13th century Buddhist monk in Japan. And I belong to a lay organization known as the Soka Gakkai, and there's an organization here in Vancouver and constituent organizations throughout the world. I think there's 192 countries now that have chapters of the SGI or Soka Gakkai. So what I'm going to talk today about is the specific kind of stream of Buddhism that I practice. So by way of background, Nichiren was a Buddhist monk that lived in 13th century Japan. And at the time in Japan, of course, there was extreme social unrest and a lot of natural disasters, invasions. It was life was nasty, brutish, and short. And through his studies of Buddhist teachings, he was shipped off to a monastery when he was 8 years old, as was the way for people to get education in that time. He determined, when he was 8 or 9 years old, to become the wisest person in all of Japan. So he searched for a spiritual and practical practice that would help people of all backgrounds, because he came himself from very humble beginnings. His family were fisher folk, and so he came from very humble beginnings, and he wanted to find a way for all people to overcome the sufferings that the original Buddha recognized, those sufferings of birth, death, sickness, and old age. What people think of Buddha as is sometimes a supernatural being. In terms of our practice, we look at Buddhahood or the Buddha as being our original state of life, and that what Nichiren came to the conclusion was that everyone has this original state of life. We all have this fundamental wisdom within our life, and that every human being is born with this Buddha nature. So Nichiren's view was that this Buddha nature, this divine nature, if you will, provided unlimited source of courage, compassion, and wisdom to create value in your lifetime, and in not only with your own life, but also impact society and your community around you. So the core practice of Nichiren Buddhists is chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which is the title of the Lotus Sutra, which is one of the teachings taught by the historical Buddha, as well as reciting key portions of the Lotus Sutra as well. Now, you might imagine that Nichiren proclaiming that people of every strata of society possessing this original state of life, this Buddhahood, and therefore could achieve enlightenment was problematic in 13th century Japan. So I thought, tying into the theme of difficulty, persecution, I thought I would talk a little bit about the history for Nichiren. So at the time in Japan, the dominant Buddhist schools were closely tied to the feudal government structures. And the interpretation of Buddhist teachings of the day really reinforced that kind of hierarchy. It served the interests of the powerful and encouraged obedience from the people. Nichiren criticized both the religious and the secular leaders of his day for ignoring the widespread suffering of the people. And Nichiren's views, of course, attracted a lot of attention from the powerful. He faced execution, and he was exiled twice. Despite the persecution, though, he remained very steadfast in his opinions and continued to encourage his followers. A lot of these writings, these encouragements that he wrote during this time period are in the form of letters. Some have been collected, many have been collected and are available in translation today. I suppose tonight's theme also wouldn't be complete, well, it sort of resonates, I guess, with the modern history of the lay organization Soka Gakkai too, which really revived the practice of Nichiren Buddhism following the Second World War. The lay organization of SGI was founded in 1930 by two educators, Tsunesaburo Makaguchi and Jose Toda, who saw a need to develop a more humanistic model for teaching, actually. And Makaguchi, who was an elementary school principal, saw his teaching theories closely reflected in the philosophy and practice of Nichiren Buddhism. So there was this early kind of joining of the Soka Gakkai, which translates as value creation society, with the practice of Nichiren Buddhism, the core practice of Nichiren Buddhism. And Makaguchi saw that his teaching theories really connected with Nichiren's view that individuals were respect-worthy and had this potential, infinite potential for, I mean, he might not have called it, well, he did call it Buddhahood, but, you know, this infinite capacity for growth and change. Both Makaguchi, because the Soka Gakkai was established in 1930, both Toda and Makaguchi objected to Japan's military ambitions during World War II and were arrested and imprisoned as thought criminals for their pacifist stance. Makaguchi and Toda both continued to practice and study while they're in prison, and Makaguchi, in fact, died in prison at the age of 73 in 1944. Toda survived and was released 8 months after they were taken to prison, and that was just a few weeks, it was towards the end of the war, and just a few weeks before the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Toda, despite these circumstances, Toda was very determined to continue his practice and rebuild this organization that he and Makaguchi had established. So the third key figure, I would say, in the modern or the revival of Nichiren Buddhism is Daisaku Ikeda. And Daisaku Ikeda was a young man at the end of the Second World War. He had, like everyone all the people in Japan, had been devastated personally and had seen the suffering that war had brought to the Japanese people. And he met Toda at a Buddhist discussion meeting shortly after the end of the Second World War. Ikeda was inspired by what he heard from Toda about creating a more peaceful world through individual self development, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So Ikeda was so inspired that he decided to take up this cause of rebuilding the Soka Gakkai, and his vision was to create an international, global organization of lay practitioners who would use the practice in order to overcome their sufferings and challenges in life, to develop themselves, to develop their potential and influence their community, their families, communities, this global society as a whole in a positive way. As I said before, the SGI has grown immensely since the end of the Second World War. There's over 10 million people that practice now. And the membership of the SGI embraces people of all cultural backgrounds, and really the practice is based on those grassroots community connections that we make with each other. And on an individual level, we generally tend to meet in small community groups in neighborhoods around the Lower Mainland in this area anyway. And on a larger scale, SGI's mandate, our charter, is about facilitating dialogues on peace and understanding each other's culture and having educational exchanges. And those are more of the organizational initiatives around the world. So in terms of these dialogues that are being held, I think it resonates a lot with a number of fundamental Buddhist themes that SGI members, Nichiren Buddhists, strive to employ in their daily lives. And it goes back to what was said in the previous presentation about through challenges we have the opportunity to grow as human beings and to develop our humanity. Despite the apparent sophistication of modernity, human beings continue to struggle with adversity, both from within our own negativity and limitations, and we struggle with big challenges without globally in our communities. We just have to look around to see that there is so much suffering and painful and discouraging issues that we have to deal with in our world right now. So Nichiren's teachings really emphasize that the key to developing a better world is respecting others. And the key to developing our capacity, respecting others, is key to developing our capacity as human beings. So respect is, Nichiren points to a story that's contained within the Lotus Sutra about a character called Bodhisattva Never Disparaging. So Bodhisattva Never Disparaging is described as having lived in the remote past, sort of a mythical character, and it was his practice to bow in reverence to absolutely everyone he met and praise that person's inherent Buddha nature. These kinds of actions often provoked violence and abuse in return. Buddha Never Disparaging's assertions no doubt challenged people's deeply held negative assumptions about their own nature and the nature of life. Their reactions, however, never managed to upset his convictions. He would simply retreat to a safe distance so that the rocks couldn't hit him in the story, and repeat his vow of respect for these individuals and honor the potential for good within his persecutors. As the story goes, over time and as a result of these actions, Never Disparaging's humanity comes to shine to the extent that those who have despised and persecuted him are moved to become his disciples and thus enter a path of attaining Buddhahood themselves. Bodhisattva Never Disparaging constitutes the essence of Buddhist practice. Such respect is not limited, though, I want to be clear, to passive regard for others. I'd say it's courageous, bold, and actively engaged in our community. We shouldn't sit by and accept something that we see that is incorrect. It's very important to use our voice to speak out and to support others. In adversity also lies the opportunity, not only for self-development, but also to support one another and to develop our humanity and compassion as human beings. From the Buddhist perspective, dealing with adversity and persecution is inherently a personal journey of self-discovery and self-mastery. Now, I say self-discovery because it's learning about our own potential, our own capacity, limitless capacity to courageously face our challenges, and really accept that within our own lives we have the power to overcome our own negativity, our own limitations. As human beings, it's often our first reaction when we face adversity or persecutions to kind of look at the thing that's happening as something that's outside ourselves and something that's out of our control. Nietzschean philosophy emphasizes an approach that begins with appreciating our power within us to create positive change in our own lives and the world around us. In terms of self-mastery, I would say that that's more about transforming one's life. Once we've had that realization about our capacity, it's about transforming one's life and influencing the world around us. Now, it's not like these are 3 steps. These things are sort of going on concurrently. You reflect on things, you take action, you positively influence your environment. So the self-mastery piece is appreciating the potential of our own life, but that's just the beginning. Ultimately, for Nietzschean Buddhists, the goal is the ability to control and transform our negativity and channel it towards creating positive values in our lives and society. Core to this belief is the acceptance that we have a role to play in creating a peaceful world. Well, our journey begins with our own lives. It certainly does not end there. Accepting that all life is interconnected, ultimately, our own sense of happiness and fulfillment in life cannot be accomplished without making effort to build a culture of peace around us. So our enlightenment and happiness is not in isolation or a vacuum from everyone around us. For some people, the stage for creating value and happiness in society, in their environment, is the neighborhood. In others, it's an international mission, and both are equally valuable and important. And one's not more important than the other. So Ikeda, who I mentioned earlier, who's one of the key people in SGI's development since World War II, has dedicated his life to encouraging and inspiring people to see potential in themselves. And he travels the world and meets many individuals from all walks of life and faith backgrounds who exemplify this inner strength to overcome all forms of adversity and persecution. He's met Rosa Parks and Nelson Mandela and Wangari Maathai and Linus Pauling, and carried out dialogues with individuals with, I see the sign that says time, many walks of life, many backgrounds, philosophical, religious, and otherwise. There are so many SGI members over the years who have overcome incredible challenges in their personal lives. In my own life, I'll say briefly, the philosophy and practice really informs my decisions, my work as an advocate, and how I interact with the world. The journey of self-mastery begins first with the discovery and deep conviction that each person around me is precious, and that everyone has this Buddha nature, this divine nature, and that we all have an important role to play in creating a better world.